Hello and welcome to Salem Voices. I'm Lucy Rose, your host, and I'm so excited to introduce you today to our special guest coming to us from her home in Houston, Cindy Lovin McArthur, Salem College class of 75, and a dear friend of mine. And I would normally right now, I would say, I'm not going to tell you how long ago, but I think you already figured it out because I just said her class year. Miss Cindy, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing well, Lucy. Glad to reconnect with you.
You aren't kidding. That has actually been a very long time. I think we may have seen each other at one or two reunions, but that's it. So I'm just thrilled. But I have to say, your story is about as interesting as anybody I've ever seen. And if anybody's ever thought about rocket science, today's your day. Cindy's had quite the journey since I saw her for an extensive period of time at Salem until today. There's been a lot that has gone on in her life. So I'm going to be quiet. And over the next couple of minutes, Cindy, 3 or 4 minutes, if you'll just kind of catch people up in general of what you've been up to since then.
Well, it has been a long time since I graduated from Salem. Even as I say, over 45 years ago, I'm incredulous that it has been that long.
Well, you don't look like it. You don't look like it at all.
Neither do you, Lucy. I honestly feel like that if we were walking down the street in New York City, we'd recognize each other. But I have had an interesting journey. Since I left Salem, and professionally, I think it's been a little bit different than the course I might have thought of after graduation. I really didn't start working full time till 13 years after I graduated, and I started as an elementary school teacher here in Houston. I did that for 10 years, and I had that moment, maybe that middle age crisis, when I said, I think I really want to go and try, not go back, because I never really done it, to what I thought I was going to do when I graduated from Salem. And so that was to really work in a museum or a science center, a historic restoration, and tell a story about the work they did. So I boldly left teaching and worked at the Johnson Space Center, Visitor Center, Space Center Houston, in an office which provided NASA education resources to educators around the country. And then after 4 years, I must have a restless nature. I decided that I thought I wanted to change jobs again and make the move over to NASA. And so I moved to an education office there and worked in the Office of Education at JSC, at Johnson Space Center, for a number of years as a contractor, and then moved to become a civil servant. And then in that role, just took on more and more responsibilities, becoming the director of the Office of STEM Engagement, serving in a role that we call within external relations, my home office, integration manager, working directly with Commercial Crew Program and the International Space Station. And then finally, after changing jobs like 4 times in the last 5 years, I have landed in my current role, which is the Deputy Director of the External Relations Office at the Johnson Space Center.
Okay, that's just got to be the coolest thing ever. And for anybody watching, I'm just not kidding. I'm just so impressed. Anybody watching, a little secret, and I don't normally do this when I do these interviews, clearly. I don't normally talk about the spouse because in this case, it's all about you, period. However, just out of interest to everybody watching, I think it is kind of cool to know that Cindy's husband also is an actual astronaut, like the real thing. So what you're seeing behind her are some real models of some of the space things that have traveled around and all that stuff. So Cindy's whole family has been involved in NASA now for a long time.
It has been a remarkable journey, both for Bill and for me. My Salem friends and classmates will know that I dated him throughout Salem. They rarely saw him because he was off doing military stuff.
I actually thought you made it up, Cindy, that he really was.
Many people felt he was imaginary, but I don't think that I ever dreamed that he would become an astronaut. And add to that, impossible dream that I would end up working at NASA as well. It has been an exciting life, and what a great place to work. It is a wonderful.
It's really cool. So why don't you tell us what you do? I mean, all right, so I'm watching a launch. That's
Right.
really cool. And I'm watching mission control and everybody at the consoles and all that stuff. What did you do? What kind of role do you
So
play with this
External
technology?
Relations
Yeah.
is a mission support organization. And so at JSC, we house the International Space Station program, and we are also the home of Mission Control. And so when our office has the Public Affairs Office, which is really responsible for providing the commentary. If you're watching the news and you see some astronaut out on a spacewalk, and the voice you hear describing that is someone in our office sitting in mission control providing that commentary. If you see NASA, JSC in the news, it's really our office that has facilitated those media interviews. In addition to that, we believe that internal communications to our workforce are very important. And we have an office that concentrates in that, as well as engagement outside the gates of JSC with the community and with community partners. We also have the Office of STEM Engagement, which does education activities and develops resources based on NASA content. And finally, we have the Office of Legislative and Affairs, which is really the liaison as a federal agency with elected officials, both locally, regionally, and nationally.
Okay, so I just think you run the world with what you do.
No, they're
Honestly,
far
like,
from
were you
it.
reading from a script? How do you even remember all those things? No, I'm kidding. But I want to give folks a real life example of what you just said, because I can connect the dots directly to Salem. A couple of years ago, we had Stephanie Wilson, one of your astronauts, actually speaking at our graduation. And what was it? Wasn't too long after that, Cindy. You and I kind of reconnected, but I was watching something on television, a launch on television, truthfully. And I texted Cindy and said, Cindy, I think I might be hearing Stephanie Wilson on the console actually talking with the astronaut. And you wrote back and said, I don't think so. That's not her. Only to find out it really was, right? And that
Yeah.
was really you. Though, I mean, it's your work that does it.
She was in what's called the Capcom position, communicating with the astronauts. And it's funny, I hate to admit, I didn't have NASA TV on at the moment. I'm really glad you did. So I had to go turn on NASA TV and do confirmation that indeed it was Stephanie Wilson doing the
It's so funny,
back and forth with the
but
crew.
how we've now connected and
Yes.
connected with Salem through NASA is really very cool. And when I think of Salem, and I think of your journey, obviously you had a really wonderful experience at Salem. So I'm just going to ask, you took full advantage of there, and I'm going to brag about you in just a second, because you were chair of the Honor Council, you were SGA secretary. I think you won every possible academic award you could possibly win at Salem. But how did Salem actually develop you into the confident leader that you are, that you have half the world, it seems like, under your wing and purview right now?
Well, I do reflect on what was unique about that Salem experience. And I have to say that even as you move further and further away from Salem, I'm not sure you ever lose that. That there are moments that you think that's something I learned in Salem. And whether that was in the classroom or really being part of that Salem community, I think there are just so many opportunities for leadership to do things differently. I had this vague idea of what I wanted to do, and even back in the early 70s, Salem was so creative in its approach to education that it allowed me to do independent studies that I really guided on my own. So to think that, as a junior, that the college said, it's okay, you can take a semester and you go off and you self-motivate, you do all of those things, I think were really essential to helping me get those skills that you need to be successful in the workplace. I did 2 independent studies in addition to January terms, and I think being able to sort of shape my own course was key, plus those leadership opportunities.
Yeah, shape your own course. That's really an interesting thing. And you had that drive within yourself as well to know that's what you wanted to do. I want to pick up on one thing you said too about storytelling a few minutes ago. and how important that is to you. Clearly, what you are responsible for is communications to a greater extent, lesser or not. We're going to talk about the education component of that in a few minutes, but the communications, you talked to me when we were talking yesterday about the importance of really being able to take a complex subject and make it simple for folks to understand. But as you think about communications and the role that you do, what would you say are kind of the most important things that you've learned and that we can use to communicate better as well, perhaps?
So I'm absolutely positive my Salem friends are shocked that I work for a space agency where the content is technical and scientific, because I really avoided the science building at all costs. And so I think that speaks to being a good communicator is you really don't have to be the subject matter expert to take complex things like literally rocket science to share them with the audiences. But part of it is knowing your audience and knowing what will resonate with them. At NASA, one of the things we want to communicate is the value of human spaceflight. And so part of that is thinking about what would be important to an educator if we're talking to that audience and sharing those resources that are the right fit for that educator. If we're talking to the media, the message is always similar, but it does have to be the right fit to meet the needs or to make someone be interested. I don't think you can tell the same message every single time without some tweaks.
No doubt about it. And as I think about when you said the value of the message, because it is all about the value, another thing we chatted about, and I just really find so fascinating that my guess is a lot of people may not realize is how much research and health related stuff that you actually do as a part of the NASA program, especially on the space station and in all of your flights. But as Salem transitions into being the nation's only liberal arts college, as you know, that is really focusing on developing women leaders that lead through a lens of health. How does all that fit in with this? What kind of real health stuff and medicine stuff and research and things is NASA involved in when you do that?
You're right, Lucy. Not a lot of people think about NASA being involved in medicine and health research, but it's a multifaceted approach. I think one of the things that's really important to NASA overall is the health and safety and the well-being of our employees, no matter where they work. So whether it's at Johnson Space Center or at any other NASA center, that is really a core value for NASA. And of course, what you have to realize is at Johnson Space Center, some of our employees work 250 miles above the Earth. And so they're on the International Space Station, which is a national laboratory, very much like Los Alamos or Lawrence Livermore, but it's a space station that orbits the Earth. And the reason why it's important is that it's a place that is missing one thing that we have to deal with every day, and that's gravity. And so the ability to be able to do medical research in microgravity is just an amazing opportunity for researchers, because you take microgravity out of the mix and you are able to do things that don't easily happen on Earth. And I'll give you an example that you and I can appreciate because we're a certain age, is that microgravity also and long duration space flight impacts astronaut health. And so one of the things that happens is bone loss in microgravity, because really, you're not walking around and you're floating, which is fun. But one of the things is research on bone loss. And when you get to be our age, Lucy, osteoporosis and how we can mitigate that is important. And so we look at that both from a research perspective on space station and how it will benefit folks on Earth, but also knowing that if we send people to Mars, how in the world will they get out of a capsule and actually be able to function on Mars if we don't have them healthy when they get there. So much of what we do is really looking at how we can keep folks on space station and for longer journeys deeper into space healthy. And what we know is that while that will benefit those astronauts, there are also implications that it will benefit life here on Earth.
I just think it's fascinating as we think about preparing our students for the future in this health leadership kind of an environment. It's important to think broadly, isn't it, about all of the different applications that our graduates will be able to take advantage of in terms of their ability to impact health. So I look at that and go, now, not that they all need to be astronauts, Cindy. They don't all have to go to space and do
It
that.
would be okay, but we've got a great internship program
Well,
at
that's what I was going to
NASA.
say. I think
We need those Salem students to look at that. The one thing though is I think in a model where you're looking at an industry that is very STEM focused, is that while that is absolutely the primary focus of the majority of the workforce, it takes a village. I mean, we have communicators, we have writers, we have lawyers. So the focus that Salem has on the combination of the health focus at a liberal arts college really speaks to what an industry needs. It needs individuals who have different skills to really contribute to that overall health focus and importance of health.
Yeah, when I hear you talk, I just hear the educator in you come out all the time. That's just who you are, I think, at your core. What does it mean to you to be an educator, and what does that mean you bring to kind of your work every day? You're talking about internships and students and all of that. I can see it still excites you. What does that mean?
It does. It does. In fact, I think my dream job was probably to be director of the Office of STEM Engagement at JSC, and then I realized, I just love this whole group of things we do within ERO. I am never far from being the kindergarten teacher that I was for 10 years. And I tell people all the time when they talk about leadership, that my best lessons in being a leader really I learned at Salem and then being a kindergarten teacher, because as an educator, you are the most important factor in the success of every child in your classroom, and that you control the climate, and that if you're having a good day, everybody has a good day, and that success is not going to be the same for everybody, and you have to, as a leader or an educator, you have to change your approach dependent on that individual. And so for me, I think about that every day when I go into work, is that those lessons in being in the classroom, the best job probably I've ever had and the hardest job, have served me well. And teachers sometimes think I can't do anything else. I think, being an educator really transitions very well to different careers.
I love your wisdom. I just love what you've learned. And I'm going to take you way back now in your life to when you first left Salem. You married Bill, you became a military family, and you moved 11 times in 13 years. That's not easy. Anybody who's ever moved once knows that's not easy. I can't even imagine. But it had to prepare you in some way, I think, for life and for what you do now in terms of your career, obviously at NASA. What would you say your words of wisdom? What were your learnings during that time, moving a young family, moving all over the place like that?
Even as I say that and tell people 11 times in 13 years, I pause and think, like, how in the world did we do that? You can have two approaches to life. That you can sit and wallow in your misery. You can embrace the change. And for me, I think that I had to really make a decision very early on that this was a grand adventure, and that you came into it with the idea that you were going to be action oriented. You can't wait 6 weeks to unpack your boxes if you're only going to be in a place 6 months. You have to decide that you're going to go out and make friends and find that support group. You have to get engaged in the military community, and you have to celebrate the fact that you're really lucky that you've gotten to see so many different places. And while it may not be perfect, military bases are seldom located in, the most glamorous locations in the United States. But you decide you're just going to go out and be a lifelong learner and enjoy the fact that you're in a place you never thought you were going to be. And then you pack up and you repeat. But we loved it. I just really look back to those as being pretty fun and exciting times.
So much to learn from what you just said. It's just beautiful. And I heard you mention the word, or to me, the phrase lifelong learning or life learning. So critical. Were you born with that curious desire just to learn all the time? Did that something that grew while you were at Salem? Is it just part of your DNA, as those of us in health might say?
Yeah.
It's just cool to have that. Is that something you were born with or you developed?
I think I've always been curious. I've always been a talker. I've always been a question asker, and it drives people crazy. But I'm fascinated by things I don't know. I'm fascinated by people who've had different life experiences. And I do love learning about things that I don't know about. Now, professionally, that can also be really challenging is if when you get out of your comfort zone and you want to be successful and you've got to have a learning curve because you're doing something you've never done before. But I think Salem fueled that fire. I think anytime you leave your small hometown in North Carolina and go off to the big city of Winston-Salem, that Salem encouraged that. I think Salem allowed you at the time I was there, and I like to think that it's part of that Salem soul that that they recognize that learning comes in many different forms. It comes in the classroom, it comes from your peers, it comes from informal activities, it comes from community service, and yeah, if you ask anybody at work or in my family, they will say, I love to learn. I love to forget. And it may be useless knowledge, trust me. I'm not saying that it's knowledge that that anybody really
Wait, does that mean if we're playing a Jeopardy game, you should be on my team?
Maybe, but then there's this whole section that you wouldn't want me to be in the category of like pop culture or anything
I
like
see.
that.
Okay.
I may be a little bit weak in that. I can tell you, we lived at West Point, and Bill was a professor at West Point, and we had cadets come to the house. And I told him I had to subscribe to People magazine because I was so out of what they were talking about that I needed to get a little bit smarter on pop culture. And now with grandkids, I got to get smart again.
I just have to say, though, when you think about life learning and lifelong learning and curiosity, that's certainly one of the traits that we'll be really focusing on as we develop leaders at Salem, too, is that life learning kind of curiosity piece. But don't you find it just enriches your life and makes life fun for you every day when you're going out looking for things to learn more about?
I do. And I think that's part of what I love at NASA is that while we know the work we do, I mean, we just landed a rover on Mars. And we don't know. We think we know we might find this, and this, but there's always that element of surprise. NASA in and of itself is an agency which explores. And so I think it fosters that lifelong learning.
I love that. And I love how they're characterizing the rover as the longest selfie stick.
It's crazy. It has its own social media account, and I love the fact that we can take something that is inanimate that is not going to talk to us,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
actually, and it has this personality that engages, audiences around the
Around
world.
the world. Okay. All right. You've been a successful leader your entire life. Okay. Because we can talk about selfie sticks all day too. That's kind of fun. But I want to get back to the leadership part because I just look at you and you just radiate that. But what would you say has been your most important leadership learning? And kind of how did Salem prepare you to lead? And you gave me a great example, and I know you're going to go into right now, but I think you have a little bit different leadership style, perhaps, than people think.
I do. I think Salem. Anytime you come into a new environment and you are able to take on some leadership roles, I think it validates the fact that you may have some skill in that area. Salem certainly gave me that opportunity and a lot of support as you take on leadership roles. Being secretary of the Student Government Association was a pretty safe leadership role. Honor Council, when you are responsible for difficult conversations with peers, that was a huge learning experience, and that you're leading a team to do that. But I think a pivotal moment in my leadership journey occurred after I got to NASA, and I had a manager. Um, who call me in to say that they're really basically, I'm going to give you some good advice on how to get ahead at NASA. And I was I'm waiting for, like, well, give me the scoop on how this is going to happen. And he said, you're too nice. You are just absolutely too nice. You smile too much. You thank people too much, and you give people too many accolades. Like if they do a good job, you are all over the first one being a cheerleader. And he said, that's just not going to work. And I have to tell you, Lucy, I was stunned. I thought to myself, this is kind of the core of who I think I am. This is me. I'm a kind person. And so I did. I thought for weeks about it. And for me, the pivotal moment was, I'm going to show him I can be all those things that I think who are inherent to who I am, and use him as my strengths. Those are the things that will enable to me to be a leader. I might not be just like you, and my style may be really different, but I can use all those things to my advantage. The other part of that is I think if you ask anybody who works with me, they would probably say she's really nice, and then there would be the but. She's really tough. She really sets high expectations for us. So I don't think being strong it excludes you from being kind and nice. I think it's one of the things that women bring to a leadership role.
That's what I was just going to ask you. As we think about health leadership, just as an example, but this is really true across most industries, honestly, that very few women, relatively speaking, 25% of them are in those senior leadership roles. And that's one of the things we're going to try to do is help deal with that gender gap inequity. But as we think about that, why is it important then for women to even be in those senior roles? You just acknowledged, I think, that there's perhaps a difference in style. Is that important to you, or yeah?
I think that you shouldn't have cookie cutter leaders. That if you do, you don't meet the needs of your workforce. You have people with similar points of view. You really want diversity of experience. You want people who think differently, and I think honestly, you hate to generalize that these are feminine traits and these are masculine. That's really not true. But I think women are transformational leaders. And I think it's because of the things that maybe come naturally to us. We care. We care about the work. We care about the people who do the work, and we care about those who benefit from our work. That's important to us. We have women who are senior leaders at NASA, and I see in them those qualities that they continue to do the things they do extremely well, but they do it differently than perhaps a male leader. And I think those women in a virtual world, um, it's very important. I have not seen the majority of people in my organization for 1 year. We have been teleworking for a year. And we talked a little bit about that, Lucy, is how do you connect? How do you show the warmth and caring? How do you help someone through a difficult situation and you're not in the room with them? And so I don't think we'll ever work the same way again at NASA, and I think in all the work we do. And I think the skills that women leaders have will be more important than ever in the future.
Wow. I just want to reflect on just two quick things you also said, because I think I heard you really describe authenticity, be authentic as a leader as to whom you are, and also really to lean on your strengths as a leader and let those take those forward. And so as I listen to you and I think about we'll never work the same again, bringing those to the forefront and being that person that also elicits trust and all of that just means so very much. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, I do think being authentic and true to yourself.
Yeah.
You got to tweak yourself always, but I think people know and appreciate when you show that that it's not a good day. I think people they resonate with the fact that you're a leader, that you show your weaknesses, and that you admit I don't know something, and I think that gains you real value and trust with the folks with whom you work.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. We're going to shift now to Salem. So we can just kind of wear a little bit different hat, a little bit different vibe here as we think about this. So I want to loosen you up a bit and just ask you a couple of those rapid fire questions. So just one word if you want. What was your favorite course at Salem?
Independent study design. I can't do it in one word. Independent study designing a museum exhibit for Old Salem.
Oh, that's really cool. I wish we had time to probe that. Maybe we'll have to do it at version 2 with you. All right. What faculty member had the greatest impact on you?
Dr. Inzer Byers in the history department.
A real loss.
Legendary.
Legendary. You're not kidding. Okay. What was your favorite tradition at Salem?
I'm going to surprise you. I can't do it in one word. I loved Founders Day. I loved the fun we had with Founders Day, but I loved the moment we paused and reflected on the heritage of Salem. I love just that moment before the crazy fun games and songs and things started, when we stood around and honored the fact that we had such a rich heritage and tradition.
See, I just love that. And they call the games part of it now, I think they call Fall Fest. And the Founders Day is a separate kind of piece. But what you just said was how in those days we brought the two together. Yeah. We really kind of doing both at once. And that was so much fun, both of those pieces. But that's cool that you like that piece the most. All right, so we've talked about this, and I know for you, when I'm going to ask you, did Salem have a secret sauce for you? And how would you describe that? What about your time at Salem caused you to love it the most, and kind of what makes you want to wrap your arms around it in terms of what Salem did for you?
And Lucy, I will tell everyone honestly, I never wanted to go to Salem College. I had spent a summer there in the North Carolina Governor's School, and I felt I knew Salem, and it was not for me. Let's fast forward to my senior year, and it's late April, early May. I have applied to every single college that I could think of and had gone on visits, and I never found one that I thought was right. And my parents were truly reaching a desperation point. I know this because my father mentioned a gap year if that was necessary. And in Little Red Springs, North Carolina, you didn't do gap years. And they kept saying, like, what are you looking for? Why? And it wasn't that I didn't want to go to a women's college. I applied to women's colleges, and I said, I don't know. I don't know what I'm looking for. And so finally, my parents said, let's go to Salem. And I remember telling them, we can go, but I'm not going there. And I'm not going on a tour because I've already lived on campus and it's pretty, but no. I walked into main hall, and Edith Kirkland, who was the director of admissions, is the only person I remember interfacing with. And she took me into her room, and she had read my resume, which I'm sure I hand carried because it was the day time long before email. And our entire conversation was about me. And I I just sat there, and and the word she said to me is, Salem can help you reach your potential. And she said, not only that, you will contribute to Salem while you're here. That's why you need to come to Salem. Lucy, I had seen the bells and whistles of, admissions counselors. And that interview was that this is what Salem could help me achieve. I walked out into the waiting room and looked at my parents and said, this is it. This is what I've been looking for. I want to go someplace that cares about me and wants to help me to be the best I can be. And I never looked back. Honest to goodness, those few minutes in that room with Edith Kirkland changed my life, and best decision ever. I had the pleasure of working in the admissions office for the 4 years I was at Salem. And you can imagine, I was an energetic tour guide. And I always remember saying to parents and students as they went on and on about the beautiful campus, I said, yes, we have a beautiful campus, but what makes Salem special is what you can't see. And then I went on to tell about the faculty, that, how people cared. And that, you know what, Lucy, didn't know it, but I wanted to go to someplace that cared about making me the best I could be. And that's the secret sauce to me. Really, I mean, it's that belief that Salem has in every single student, and has done it for
Right.
almost 250 years, and will continue to do it in the future.
That's exactly. I can assure you that is exactly what still happens to this day. What a story. What an amazing story. Thank you.
Well, it was a happy day for my parents. Let me just assure you. I think they felt that I was going to graduate and still be trying to decide on a college.
Well, and, I have a similar story that I won't go into about one of my daughters as well, who, kicking and screaming and everything, did not want to do a certain visit that we wanted her to make. And we got on the campus and were there less than an hour. And she said, this is where I want to go. So you just never know when, I think, that magic is going to happen.
Absolutely.
And for you, Edith listened to you and your soul and your heart and was able to give you what you needed. And Salem filled that need. That's just wonderful. What a great story. Wow. And it just shows the impact, too, of what admissions counselors can do at that interface and in that moment when they interact with someone, isn't it?
And how insightful it was. I think, how did she read me? How did she know? What questions did she ask to get to that point that she was able to talk to me about the things that I thought was important, even if I couldn't have articulated them? Yeah, it's a memorable moment in my life.
Well, and I think it picks right up on your whole career in communications as well, and listening and communicating and speaking to what other people need to hear in a way they hear it. It's just beautiful. All right, so I have to ask two more things. One, you enjoyed it so very much, and I know you had a whole lot of friends at Salem that meant a lot to you. Do you still see them? Do they still mean something to you and make an impact in your life?
They do. If you talk about secret sauce,
Yeah.
obviously, I think there is something about being at a college that is focused on women, that you develop lifelong friendships. I do keep in touch with them. They're better communicators than I am, but they won't let me go. So I appreciate that about them. But we do stay in touch, you know, in good times and difficult times. As you know, we experience something that we don't experience often in Houston, and that's winter weather. And I can count on any time that there is something going on in Houston, sometimes before my own family. It's my Salem friends who reach out to make sure we're okay. Um, Over the last few weeks, we attended a virtual baby shower for one of our friends who just has had her first grandchild. And this week we've been busy trying to reserve a spot to stay when we all return to celebrate Salem and enjoy a postponed reunion. We do stay in touch, and you know they still call you on stuff. Like if you're not if you're being ridiculous, you know, I love that. You know, I love that honest friendship where it doesn't matter that you haven't seen each other for 10 years. Boy, when you get back together, it's amazing. And what I look at is like we are still just the people we were at Salem, no matter what we've done and places we've lived. We still hark back to those days when we were enjoying life, being together in the dorm and at Salem.
It's amazing what that time in life, in particular, you'd say, creates in terms of lifelong bonds that are just there to support
Yes.
you throughout.
But it reinforces, no matter where you are in life, the importance of having good female friends. For me, I think that's true in the workplace,
Mm.
that you have those, that there's just something about being able to have that relationship with another woman that is really important.
So let's reflect. Let's think about you right now, knowing what you now know with all your life experience and all the things you've done. If you were to write a letter to your 20-year-old self or to a current 20-year-old at Salem, what would you tell them about that time in their lives?
You know, I think if I was going to say something to a brand new student at Salem, it would really be about those friendships. While you're going through your Salem experience, I don't think you pause and reflect and say, my roommate and I are roomed together for 4 years. Yeah, that's the most I've lived with anybody other than my husband and my orientation group. I mean, one of the first people I met is still a good friend, and all those people in Cluel are still such good friends. Is I would just say, stop for a minute to that new student and pause and think that and look around that room, because someone in this room is going to be one of those lifelong friends that you're going to value when you're in your 60s, like me, just as much as you valued them when you were 18 years old. So stop and enjoy that. I might also say for myself at Salem is be bold. Go for it. I certainly took advantage of many opportunities, but maybe those were ones that were in my comfort zone. And maybe I could have stretched a little bit more outside my comfort zone. And if I was thinking of a student who might be ready to leave Salem, I think I might say that you got it. I mean, you're ready. That Salem has given you all the skills and all the personal growth that you need to go out and do really good things.
Thank you. What great words of wisdom for them and frankly for everybody, whether they're at Salem or not, because as you said so clearly, it's never too late to start doing what it is you've always wanted to do. And you've left people with that feeling. So, all right, it's time to bring it home. I wish we could talk for hours and hours. I guess we can when we cut off the recording. We talk as long as we want. But for this piece of it, for everybody else to see, you get the last word. So what's on your mind? What would you like to share with people as kind of your goodbye here on this interview?
Um, I do think my experience in Salem was something that shaped me far more than I realized when I was going through that experience. And um, I do think Salem enables you to be better than you thought you could be, to do more than you thought you could do. Um, and I reflect very often how proud I am of being a Salem graduate and recognize that Salem gave me something that if I hadn't made that decision with Edith Kirkland that day, I'm not sure I would have gotten anywhere else. And I guess I would pause for a moment and think how I'm proud to be a Salem grad. I'm still very proud of Salem. And I like to think that those forward thinking Moravians almost 250 years ago would be so proud of their legacy. So thank you, Salem.
Wow, thank you. What a beautiful, that's like one of those mic drop moments. Thank you. I really appreciate it. So all I can say now, I guess, is on behalf of everybody, the whole Salem community, everybody listening, everybody who's there now and who'll be there in the future, thank you. Thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for being a part of Salem Voices.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really lovely to have you. And to all of our viewers, I look forward to seeing you again the next time we do Salem Voices. And until then, Cindy, this is you and me. This is the moment, okay? We're going to do a little fist bump and say, Salem strong.